The earliest indicator of a genuine shift isn't transformation. It's a quiet indifference toward the life you once worked hard to maintain. That subtle release of attachment can feel disorienting at first, not because something has gone wrong, but because what was once familiar no longer feels persuasive. The ambitions that used to structure your choices lose their urgency. The identity you protected begins to feel negotiable. You're not rejecting who you were, and you're not yet pursuing what's next. You're simply no longer tethered to a version of life that once felt essential. This is where many people misunderstand what's happening. They think they're stuck. They search for motivation, clarity, or a reason to feel inspired again. But what's actually occurring is far more exact. The inner framework that stabilizes your reality isn't breaking down, it's loosening. And when that loosening begins, reality becomes adjustable long before anything outwardly shifts. Neurologically, this is what occurs when emotional energy disengages from familiar thought patterns. The brain releases its old forecasts. Certainty softens. Direction feels momentarily paused. Spiritually, this stage has always been recognized as a crossing point, a moment when the old identity can no longer carry what's coming next while the new one hasn't fully arrived. Different vocabularies, same experience. What makes this phase difficult to read is how subtle it is. There's no dramatic collapse to reference, no clear signal that something is ending, just a growing neutrality toward what once defined you. And that neutrality isn't emptiness. It's openness, space that didn't exist before, space where an entirely different version of reality can start assembling itself. This is why true quantum shifts don't begin with visible movement. They begin with an internal release, so quiet that most people ignore it. But once that release starts, return to the old way of being feels oddly impossible, even if nothing externally has changed yet. And this is only the initial shift. What follows is a sequence, internal, precise, and often misunderstood, that determines whether this moment becomes a brief suspension or a real leap into a new timeline. Most people feel these changes without recognizing them. Some sense that something irreversible has begun. Very few understand how to move through what comes next without falling back into what's familiar. This is where the true process begins. Once attachment is replaced by indifference, something else quietly starts to shift. It's not your thoughts, not your plans. It's your internal baseline. The way your body carries tension, the rise and fall of emotions, the automatic way you respond before thinking. Most people get lost here because they expect external reality to shift first. But in every authentic quantum leap, the sequence is reversed. You might notice your reactions softening. Situations that once sparked urgency or defensiveness no longer grip you in the same way. A peculiar neutrality sets in, not coldness, not apathy, just less friction. The nervous system stops bracing for impact, and when that happens, perception itself changes. You remain in the same environment, yet it lands differently on you. Biologically, this reflects a shift in autonomic regulation. The body moves out of chronic survival mode and into coherence. Heart rhythm steadies. Stress hormones decline. The system stops scanning for threats and begins conserving energy. When the body exits survival, the mind lets go of its obsession with control. That's why clarity hasn't arrived yet. Clarity belongs to stability, not transition. Spiritually, this is the moment when frequency changes before form. Long before circumstances rearrange, the internal signal becomes sharper. Less noise, less contradiction. The field responds immediately. Even if the reflection takes time to appear, this is why patience often feels like stagnation. Nothing may appear to be happening, yet everything significant has already shifted. What's deceptive about this phase is how ordinary it feels. There's no rush of excitement, no emotional high. Life may feel simpler, quieter, almost dull compared to the internal chaos you once lived in. But that quiet is not emptiness, it's coherence. And coherence is what allows probabilities to collapse smoothly rather than scattering across timelines. This is why forcing positivity or visualization during this phase often feels off. The system isn't asking for stimulation, it's asking for consistency. Each time you respond calmly where you once reacted, the signal strengthens. Each time you choose presence over prediction, the new state becomes more stable. You are teaching your body which reality it belongs to. You may notice yourself pausing more before speaking, choosing differently without rehearsing reasons, letting things pass without labeling or interpreting. These are not minor changes. They are proof that your internal state is no longer organized around the old identity. And once the body leads, the mind eventually follows. The mistake is trying to rush this stage. People think something has gone wrong because nothing dramatic is happening. They abandon the shift here, reaching for familiar emotional intensity just to feel something recognizable. But intensity is not progress, it's repetition. True movement is far subtler. This internal state shift is what allows the next phase to unfold. Without it, action feels forced. With it, movement becomes nearly inevitable. Not impulsive, inevitable. Once the body is no longer anchored to the past, staying still begins to feel heavier than stepping forward. And that's when the third shift begins. Not as a plan, but as motion without guarantees. After your internal state stabilizes, something subtle yet decisive occurs. Remaining in place starts to feel heavier than moving. Not because you suddenly feel confident, but because hesitation no longer feels aligned. This is where the third internal shift arises. Movement without guarantees. This is also the point where most people either transition to a new timeline or retreat. The actions that emerge here rarely look strategic. They often seem illogical to the part of you that demanded proof before acting. They are small, sometimes subtle, sometimes inconvenient. A conversation you finally stop avoiding, a decision you make without rehearsing every possible outcome, a boundary you set without explanation. These moves may not feel dramatic enough to signal transformation, yet they carry disproportionate weight because they disrupt continuity with the old pattern. From a brain's perspective, this is how new timelines become neurologically possible. Action provides new sensory feedback. That feedback interrupts old predictions. And when predictions fail, the mind becomes flexible. This is why intention alone rarely triggers a quantum leap. The nervous system requires evidence that a different future is already being inhabited, even if only in fragments. Movement provides that evidence. Spiritually, this is the moment when faith becomes practical, not as belief, but as obedience to a subtle internal signal. You don't move because you are certain it will succeed. You move because remaining still feels dishonest to the person you are becoming. This distinction is crucial. Action rooted in fear still belongs to the old timeline. Action rooted in alignment creates a rupture. What makes this phase uncomfortable is the lack of external validation. Reality hasn't caught up yet. There is no confirmation, no applause, sometimes not even relief. Just a strange awareness that something has begun to shift. This is where people begin to doubt themselves, replay choices, and look backward for reassurance. But validation always comes later, always later. Reality responds after coherence, not before. You may notice resistance arising here, not from the outside world, but from within. Old thoughts question the timing. Old identities demand logic. Old habits attempt to reclaim control. This isn't failure. It's friction between timelines. The previous structure senses that continuity has been disrupted and tries to restore what was familiar. Whether it succeeds depends entirely on what happens next. If you keep moving from this place, not impulsively, but consistently, the signal strengthens. The field starts reorganizing around a new pattern. Opportunities don't show up yet, but pathways do. Possibilities that didn't exist before become visible, not because the world has changed, but because your perception has. This is a point where people later say, everything started shifting after that one decision. They almost never recognize it in the moment. It only becomes clear in hindsight once the timeline has fully collapsed. And that collapse doesn't begin with a miracle. It begins with motion that breaks repetition. Still, this phase doesn't complete the process on its own. Movement opens a door, but something else determines whether you step through or turn back. Because once the old structure loses stability, discomfort increases. And how you relate to that discomfort determines everything. That's where the fourth shift waits, not as a test, but as a threshold. Once movement disrupts the old pattern, discomfort intensifies. Not because you did something wrong, but because the structure that once held your reality together can no longer support it. This is a phase most people misinterpret as anxiety, confusion, or self-doubt. In reality, it's friction between identities. The old self hasn't fully released. The new self hasn't fully embodied yet. The nervous system is suspended between them. What makes this phase risky isn't the discomfort itself. It's how tempting it is to read that discomfort as a signal to stop. The mind searches for familiar explanations. It asks if you moved too quickly, misunderstood the signal, or should go back and rethink everything. But thinking was never the issue. The discomfort arises precisely because thinking no longer holds the authority it once did. Physiologically, this is a liminal state. The brain dislikes ambiguity. It craves resolution, even if that resolution means return to something limiting but familiar. That's why the urge to retreat feels so rational here. The system seeks certainty, not expansion. And certainty is always easier to find in the past than in the future. Spiritually, this moment has been described across traditions as the crossing, a place where the old self loses leverage. There is often a strange mix of calm and unease, a sense that something significant is unfolding paired with fear of the unknown. This confuses people because they assume clarity must arrive before peace. In truth, peace often comes first. Clarity follows later. This is where many quantum jumps quietly collapse, not through failure, but through self-interruption. People override the process by reintroducing urgency, distraction, or overanalysis. They mistake discomfort for danger instead of recognizing it as the natural pressure of expansion. Real growth doesn't feel like immediate improvement. It feels like instability. What matters here is tolerance, not endurance. Tolerance. The ability to remain present without rushing to resolve the feeling, to let the nervous system recalibrate without forcing meaning onto the experience. Every time you respond differently than before, the old timeline weakens. Every time you stay present with a sensation instead of escaping it, the new timeline stabilizes. This is also where external validation loses relevance. Others may not see what's happening. Some may even question your choices. That doesn't mean you're off track. It means you've stepped outside a shared pattern. Moving between realities temporarily removes the language that made your old life legible to others. If you navigate this phase without collapsing backward, something important follows. Space opens. Not just conceptually, but physically, emotionally, and cognitively. The grip loosens. Effort drops. The sense of holding everything together fades. And that's when the fifth shift begins, not as loss, but as release. Once discomfort eases its hold, something subtle yet unmistakable emerges. Effort decreases, not because everything is resolved, but because you're no longer carrying the same internal weight. This is a fifth shift. Release happening naturally, not through discipline or decision, but because there is nothing left to bear. Expectations soften. Old attachments lose urgency. You stop managing outcomes and begin allowing responses. This phase is often mistaken for loss, because things fall away without drama. Habits you once relied on no longer fit. Certain conversations stop repeating. Some desires simply don't follow you. But what's truly occurring is a return of capacity. When an internal system is no longer overloaded with maintenance, space opens. Cognitively, emotionally, energetically. And space is what reality needs to move. Neurologically, this is where cognitive load decreases. Fewer competing narratives, less internal friction. The brain shifts from constant prediction to receptive awareness. That alone changes perception. You begin noticing possibilities that were always present but went unregistered because attention was elsewhere. Opportunities don't appear suddenly. They become visible. Spiritually, this is the phase where the field responds more clearly. When mixed signals stop broadcasting, feedback accelerates, synchronicities increase, timing sharpens, and events begin aligning without force. People later describe this phase as when everything just started flowing, even though the groundwork was laid much earlier during less obvious moments. What's crucial here is restraint. Many rush to refill the space they've created, grabbing new goals too quickly, seeking meaning, try to explain what's happening before it fully settles. But this space is functional. It's the buffer that allows a final shift. When enough space exists, alignment emerges almost automatically. The sixth shift doesn't feel like effort at all. It feels like recognition. Choices stop being debated internally. You begin responding to life from a place that already knows where it's going, even if you can't yet articulate how. Decisions come faster, clearer, requiring less explanation. Not because you figured everything out, but because the future has begun pulling more strongly than the past ever did. This is future self-alignment in its most practical form. Not visualization, not imagination, but obedience to a pattern that is already emerging. You no longer wait for confirmation. You move as if continuity has already been established, because internally it has. The timeline starts collapsing around that assumption. And this is where people later say the jump happened all at once. In reality, it's the cumulative result of every internal shift leading up to this point. Identity loosened, state changed, movement broke repetition. Discomfort was tolerated, space was created, alignment locked in. What follows isn't magic, it's momentum. Once the future becomes a dominant reference, reality reorganizes with surprising speed. Not because you forced it, but because nothing inside you resists it anymore. And when resistance disappears, the field doesn't hesitate. That is the moment people call a quantum jump. Most don't fail at a quantum jump due to lack of discipline or belief. They fail because they misread the phase they're in. They mistake dissolution for regression, rushing clarity before coherence. Without realizing it, they interrupt a process that is already working. What you just moved through isn't theory. It's a sequence. Once certain internal thresholds are crossed, there's no real way to unlearn them. The remaining question is how to stabilize what's already shifting, so it doesn't fade the moment life accelerates again. Many slip back into old timelines, not because they want to, but because the nervous system seeks familiarity under pressure. When identity is in transition, structure matters, not rigid structure, but grounding structure. Something that helps the mind and body recognize a new pattern as home. That's why quantum rebirth exists. It's created for the exact moment when the old way no longer fits, and the new hasn't fully settled. It guides you to understand internal changes, move through the transition without rushing or second-guessing, and stabilize a new sense of self before the external world fully reflects it. Alongside it, the quantum grimoire provides a practical way to anchor this shift day by day. Through conscious writing, symbolic focus, and simple grounding practices, it translates internal coherence into something repeatable. The jump then becomes not just a moment, but a new baseline. If this message resonates, it's likely because you're already in motion, not searching, not waiting, simply moving through a threshold that doesn't announce itself loudly. Quantum rebirth and the grimoire await in the pinned comment whenever you're ready to deepen what's already unfolding. Nothing here needs forcing. Nothing needs rushing. The shift has already begun.